Keanu Reeves steps into a luxurious restaurant in the heart of the city, dressed in simple, wrinkled clothes, as if he had just come from an ordinary day. He selects a discreet table, hoping to go unnoticed, while the dazzling glow of crystal chandeliers casts a warm light across the space. Before he even has a chance to place his order, a waitress approaches with a look of disdain, her posture exuding arrogance. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" she sneers, her voice dripping with irony, loud enough for other patrons to hear. What happens next not only leaves everyone in the restaurant stunned, but also reveals a truth that changes everything. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel. New stories drop tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. We have another special story for you. Lumiere Restaurant was a symbol of sophistication in Beverly Hills, nestled on one of the city's most prestigious avenues. Its expansive windows framed a breathtaking view of streets bathed in the glow of luxurious neon signs, where sleek sports cars glided by in slow motion. Inside, every detail was meticulously curated to impress. Lumiere wasn't just a restaurant. It was a destination for those who wanted to be seen and admired. Ashley, one of Lumiere's most seasoned waitresses, moved through the dining room with practiced grace, her polished smile never faltering. Her perfectly styled bun and impeccably tailored uniform reinforced the image of efficiency and control she prided herself on. To her, working at such a renowned establishment wasn't just a job. It was a privilege, and she never missed an opportunity to mention it. But Ashley had another side, an inflated sense of pride that often teetered on arrogance. She had a knack for quickly sizing up patrons, mentally sorting them into categories based on their clothing, demeanor, and overall appearance. "Some people just don't belong here," she often mused. Then, the restaurant's glass doors swung open smoothly, and a man stepped inside. He wore faded jeans, a simple shirt, and a jacket that, while comfortable, bore no trace of designer branding. His presence was understated, almost unnoticeable, as he made his way calmly to the reception desk. Keanu Reeves was never one to flaunt his wealth. Despite being one of Hollywood's most famous stars, his reserved nature stood in stark contrast to the glitz and extravagance of Beverly Hills. In that moment, he appeared to be just another ordinary customer. At the reception desk, Ashley was deep in conversation with a colleague about a VIP reservation when she noticed him. Her words trailed off as she abruptly shifted her focus, her gaze narrowing with barely concealed disdain. He didn't fit the mold of Lumiere's usual clientele. Without bothering to hide her reaction, she tilted her head, giving him a slow once-over, her eyes lingering on his scuffed boots. "Good evening," she said in a dry tone, forcing a fleeting smile that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "How can I help you?" "I'd like a table, please," Keanu replied, his voice calm and polite. Ashley arched an eyebrow, as if she had just heard something utterly absurd. Her expression seemed to ask, "How dare he?" Crossing her arms, her forced smile vanished entirely. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is a very exclusive restaurant," she said coolly. Keanu remained unfazed, his calm smile unwavering. "Yes, this is the place," he replied evenly. Ashley let out a short, incredulous laugh, shaking her head. "Okay, just a moment. I need to check something." Without bothering to conceal her irritation, she spun on her heel and strode toward the reception office. Sitting at the computer, she typed his name into the reservation system with exaggerated flair. When nothing appeared, she rolled her eyes and sighed dramatically, before marching back to the dining area, visibly annoyed. "Well, as I suspected, you don't have a reservation," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "We do have a few tables available, but just so you know, this isn't a casual dining spot." Keanu remained unbothered, his composed demeanor only seeming to agitate her further. "I'd like to dine here," he said, his tone unchanged. Ashley exhaled loudly, snatching a menu with an abrupt motion. "All right, but I'll need to seat you in a suitable area. Follow me." Without checking to see if he was following, she walked briskly through the dining room, weaving past elegantly set tables. Finally, she reached the farthest, least desirable corner of the restaurant. With an audible thud, she dropped the menu onto the table. "Here you go. This table is perfect for you," she said in a falsely sweet tone. "If you need anything, let me know, but only if it's necessary, okay?" Keanu maintained his slight smile, ignoring her condescension. "Thank you. I'm sure this will be an interesting experience." As Ashley turned and walked away, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something was about to happen, something she would never forget. Ashley muttered under her breath, loud enough for a nearby couple to hear, "He won't last 5 minutes here. Bet he'll leave as soon as he opens the menu." Across the dining room, Keanu calmly opened the menu, his eyes scanning the options without haste. The soothing melody of live music filled the air, but there was something about his posture, an unwavering serenity, as if nothing could disturb him. From a distance, Ashley watched with a smug smile, certain that any moment now he would glance at the prices, hesitate, and discreetly ask for the check before slipping out. With quick, mechanical steps, Ashley had led Keanu through the dining room earlier, never once bothering to look at him. Instead of seating him in the restaurant's elegant center, where the golden glow of chandeliers highlighted the luxurious atmosphere, she had deliberately chosen the most hidden, dimly lit corner. The table was near the kitchen, where the clatter of dishes and the muffled chatter of staff created a stark contrast to the refined ambiance of the main dining area. With an air of indifference, she dropped the menu onto the table carelessly. "This should do," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "I think you'll feel comfortable here. It's more private." Keanu glanced at the table, then back at Ashley, his subtle smile never wavering. "Thank you," he replied calmly. She crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes as if trying to decipher whether he was being sarcastic or simply oblivious. "You're welcome," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just so you know, we usually reserve these tables for special cases, but since we don't have any bookings tonight, you can have it." Spinning on her heel, she walked away before he could respond. When Ashley returned a few minutes later to take his order, her attitude had grown even colder. She pulled out her notepad with an exaggerated motion, barely masking her disinterest. "Have you decided what you'd like?" she asked, her voice laced with boredom. "Or would you like a recommendation?" Keanu glanced at the menu, then calmly pointed to one of the most expensive main courses. "I'd like to try this one," he said simply. Ashley stifled a laugh, covering her mouth with one hand as if struggling to hold back a snide remark. "Oh, of course," she said, her tone thick with amusement. "The filet de Rossini," Ashley repeated in a condescending tone. "A classic dish." She tilted her head, her lips curling into a malicious smile. "Just to confirm, sir, you do know this costs $350, right?" Keanu nodded, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Yes, it sounds wonderful." Ashley let out a small mocking laugh. "All right then. Just to make sure there aren't any misunderstandings later, I suggest you double-check the prices. We wouldn't want any unpleasant surprises." Keanu remained unfazed, which only seemed to irritate her further. "I'm certain," he said simply. With a dramatic sigh, as if she were doing him a great favor, Ashley jotted down the order. "Very well, as you wish. But I should warn you, our chef prefers dishes like this to be enjoyed by those who truly appreciate fine dining. I hope it meets your expectations." She spun on her heel but stopped abruptly, turning back with a smug expression. "Oh, and one more thing. The minimum tip expected here is 20%. Keep that in mind while you enjoy." As Keanu waited for his meal, he seemed completely unbothered by Ashley's thinly veiled hostility. He took in the restaurant's decor, listened to the pianist's soothing performance, and observed the soft flicker of candlelight on the polished tables. When his appetizer finally arrived, Ashley set the plate down with unnecessary force, causing it to slide slightly across the table. "Here's your appetizer," she said with a smirk. "I hope you enjoy it, or at least know what you're eating." Keanu, ever composed, responded with his usual politeness. "Thank you." Ashley leaned in slightly, as if trying to provoke a reaction. "You know, a lot of customers who order this dish end up not liking it. It's not exactly mainstream, but I think you'll do just fine. Good luck." Keanu met her gaze with the same unshaken calm. "It looks excellent. Thank you for your attention." Frustrated by her inability to rattle him, Ashley turned away quickly, muttering something to a coworker. "That guy won't even make it to the main course. He's going to ask for the check as soon as he sees the bill." Meanwhile, Keanu continued to eat his appetizer at a leisurely pace. From across the dining room, Ashley observed him with a smirk. "I bet he's going to ask for tap water. These types always do," she murmured to another staff member, who merely shifted uncomfortably and ignored her remark. However, at a nearby table, an elderly gentleman had been silently observing the exchange. He raised his wineglass in Keanu's direction in a subtle, knowing toast. Keanu noticed and responded with a small nod and a smile. Dinner had only just begun, but Ashley's growing disdain would not go unnoticed for much longer. A lesson in patience. After taking Keanu's order, Ashley decided to teach him a lesson. In her mind, he had no right to dine in a place like this. Instead of promptly sending his request to the kitchen, she deliberately prioritized patrons she deemed more important. She stopped to chat with an elegant couple at the center of the dining room, exaggeratedly laughing at a joke from another guest. She even went out of her way to deliver a cocktail to a table that wasn't hers. Meanwhile, Keanu continued to wait, patient as ever. In an attempt to further provoke him, Ashley repeatedly walked past his table, feigning busyness. Every time he glanced in her direction, she averted her gaze and quickened her pace, as if too occupied to tend to him. And so, the minutes dragged on. As Keanu waited patiently, an elderly patron who had been observing the scene finally approached. He was a distinguished man, dressed in a navy blue suit, his neatly combed white hair adding to his refined presence. With a warm smile, he stepped toward Keanu's table. "Good evening, young man. I hope you don't mind me interrupting, but I couldn't help but notice that you've been overlooked," he said, his tone polite yet firm. Keanu met his gaze with a calm smile. "Good evening. Don't worry, it's all fine." The elderly man chuckled softly and leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You know, sometimes being treated this way is a test of patience, but I can say with certainty that maintaining your composure is a true sign of strength." Before Keanu could respond, Ashley suddenly appeared. Her polished yet subtly authoritative tone cutting through the moment. "Sir, can I help you with something?" she asked the elderly man, her expression carefully controlled. "I wouldn't want you to disturb our customer." The elderly man narrowed his eyes slightly but remained composed. "Don't worry, miss. I was simply greeting this gentleman. It's rare to find someone so serene." Ashley sighed dramatically and gestured toward the man's table. "Well, perhaps you should return to your table and enjoy your dinner," she said, impatience creeping into her voice. Keanu observed the interaction with quiet interest, his expression unreadable. Then, turning back to the elderly gentleman, he gave a slight nod. "Thank you for stopping by. It was a pleasure speaking with you." The man returned the nod and made his way back to his table, though not before casting a final look of disapproval at Ashley, who remained entirely indifferent. A deliberate delay. When Ashley finally decided to bring out Keanu's main course, she made sure to take longer than necessary. Instead of heading straight to the kitchen, she lingered, chatting casually with the chefs while his dish sat under the warming lamp. Even when it was ready, she made a point of attending to another table first, completely ignoring the waiting plate. At last, she retrieved the dish and carried it over, setting it down on Keanu's table with an unnecessarily abrupt motion. "Here's your order. I hope you enjoy it," she said, her tone laced with irony. "Oh, and if it's not to your liking, please let us know. We can always adjust to something more affordable." Keanu, as always, remained unfazed. He glanced at the dish, then back at her with a polite nod. "It looks excellent." "Thank you," Ashley responded with a cynical smile and leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough for only him to hear. "Are you sure? It's a very sophisticated dish. Might be a bit difficult for someone who's not used to it." Keanu's expression remained serene. "I'm sure," he replied simply. "Thank you for your concern." Ashley clenched her jaw slightly, frustrated by her inability to provoke any reaction from him. Ashley walked away quickly, heading toward the bar, where she wasted no time sharing her thoughts with a co-worker who was doing his best to ignore her remarks. "He's pretending to be polite, but it's obvious he's uncomfortable," she scoffed, setting an empty glass on the counter. "I bet he doesn't even know what he's eating. It's always the same with these types. They come here to feel important, but end up embarrassing themselves." Her co-worker forced a smile, visibly uneasy. "Maybe he just wants to have dinner, Ashley. Maybe we should treat him like any other customer." Ashley stared at him, incredulous. "Like any other customer? Did you see the boots he's wearing? He doesn't belong here. Frankly, if he can't handle it, he shouldn't have walked through the door." Meanwhile, across the dining room, the couple who had been observing the scene whispered to each other. "She's awful," the woman murmured, shaking her head. "He's been nothing but polite, and she keeps trying to humiliate him." "I agree," the man replied, frowning. "It's disgraceful. I think we should say something to the manager." Grace under fire. Back at his table, Keanu finished his meal at a leisurely pace. He was aware of the sympathetic glances from other diners, but he didn't seem the least bit bothered. When Ashley returned to clear his plate, her expression still carried traces of disdain. "So," she said, forcing a saccharine smile, "did it meet your expectations?" Keanu met her gaze evenly. "It was excellent, thank you. Please tell the chefs they did an impeccable job." Ashley raised her eyebrows, caught off guard by his lack of complaint or irritation. As she walked away, she muttered under her breath, loud enough to be heard. "He might be smiling now, but let's see if he still is when the bill comes." Seated at his table, Keanu remained composed, his slight smile unwavering. Yet there was something in his expression, an awareness, a quiet understanding, that suggested the moment to act was drawing near. Escalation. Frustrated by her inability to provoke Keanu, Ashley decided to push further. After serving him the coffee he had requested, she made a point of speaking loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. "You know, it's hard to maintain standards when just anyone thinks they can walk in," she remarked to a colleague, her eyes flicking pointedly in Keanu's direction. Her co-worker, visibly uncomfortable, attempted to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Ashley wasn't finished. "That's why we have a reservations policy," she continued. "It helps us avoid situations like this." Several patrons turned their attention toward her, some frowning, others whispering among themselves. The couple who had been following the situation looked outraged. "This is outrageous," the woman murmured, placing a hand on her chest. "She's trying to humiliate him in public." At another table, the elderly gentleman took a sip of his wine, his expression darkening. "This has gone too far," he muttered under his breath. Despite the growing tension in the room, Keanu remained unaffected, his gaze drifting across the restaurant with quiet amusement. His serenity seemed to unsettle Ashley more than anything else, as if she could feel the eyes of the other patrons beginning to turn on her. 2 tables away, a well-dressed woman leaned toward her companion. "He must be someone important to stay this calm," she observed. "Anyone else would have left by now." "Or maybe," the man replied, glancing curiously at Keanu, "he's just stronger than she realizes." Determined to get some reaction, Ashley returned to Keanu's table, her approach anything but professional. "I hope you're enjoying your experience," she said, her smile exaggerated, dripping with sarcasm. "After all, it's always interesting to have different kinds of people here. It really adds a unique touch to the atmosphere." This time, Keanu fixed her with a steady gaze, his voice as calm as ever, but carrying an unmistakable weight. Ashley let out a short, nervous laugh, struggling to maintain her composure. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way," she said quickly. "It's just that, well, our clientele typically has a more traditional profile. It's rare to see someone with your style here." The room fell silent. Nearby diners paused their conversations, their attention now fully on the unfolding scene. Ashley seemed pleased with the eyes on her, believing she had the situation under control. Keanu remained silent for a few moments, his gaze steady and unwavering. His expression was firm, but there was no anger, just something unreadable, something that made Ashley shift uncomfortably. Finally, he spoke. "You're right," he said, his voice calm yet deliberate. "Perhaps I should handle this differently." Ashley blinked, caught off guard. Before she could respond, the restaurant manager appeared. A shift in power. The manager, a middle-aged man with impeccable posture and an air of authority, scanned the room, immediately sensing the tension. As his gaze landed on Keanu, his demeanor changed in an instant. His eyes widened, and without hesitation, he hurried over to the table, completely ignoring Ashley. "Mr. Reeves," the manager exclaimed, his voice filled with respect. "I wasn't aware you were visiting us today. Please let me know how I can assist you." Ashley's face went pale. The blood drained from her cheeks as she looked from the manager to Keanu, utterly bewildered. Keanu held the manager's gaze for a moment before turning back to Ashley. "Now," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "let's talk about how we treat people." The silence in the room was deafening. Every eye in the restaurant was fixed on the table, waiting to see what would happen next. Reckoning. The manager, visibly shaken, ignored Ashley entirely as he addressed Keanu with deference. Leaning slightly forward in a gesture of respect, he spoke with deep sincerity. "Mr. Reeves, I deeply apologize for the delay in recognizing you. It's an honor to have you dining with us this evening. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to make your experience more enjoyable." Ashley stood frozen, her mind racing to process what was happening. Mr. Reeves? The manager knew him. What was going on? Keanu offered the manager a slight, polite smile. "Thank you, but there's no need to worry," he said. "I'm fine. I'd just like to have a brief conversation with your staff, if that's not a problem." The manager's expression darkened slightly, sensing that something was wrong. He cast a sharp, reproachful glance at Ashley, who stood beside them, visibly trembling. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, whatever you need." Ashley's breath hitched. She opened her mouth to speak, her voice coming out in a stammer. I didn't know. I thought—" The manager cut her off with firm resolve. "Thought what, Ashley?" His tone was low but severe. "That this guest, who, by the way, is one of the owners of this restaurant, didn't deserve the same respect as anyone else?" The last traces of color drained from Ashley's face. Ashley struggled to justify herself. He didn't say who he was, and he looked— She trailed off, realizing that anything she said would only dig her deeper into trouble. Keanu finally broke the silence, his voice calm yet carrying a weight that seemed to settle over the entire room. "There's no need to announce who I am to be treated with dignity," he said evenly. "And frankly, it shouldn't matter. Everyone who walks through these doors, regardless of their appearance, should be welcomed with respect." The dining room remained riveted, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Murmurs spread among the patrons as they processed the revelation that Keanu was one of the restaurant's owners. The couple who had been following the interaction exchanged satisfied glances, while the elderly man who had observed everything nodded in discreet approval. At nearby tables, hushed conversations buzzed. A man seated with his wife leaned in and whispered, "I knew there was something different about him. He has a presence you can't ignore." His wife nodded, watching Keanu with admiration. "And look at how he's handling this, with such grace. I hope she learned something from this," someone murmured, as quiet whispers spread across the dining room. Some diners looked ashamed for not speaking up earlier, while others sat in tense silence, watching the scene unfold. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. The manager turned to Ashley, his expression a controlled mix of frustration and disappointment. "Ashley, I expect a full explanation of your behavior after your shift. For now, step away from this table and stay away. I'll be handling things from here." Ashley opened her mouth as if to protest, but the manager's firm gaze stopped her before she could utter a word. With a sharp turn, she hurried off, avoiding the stares of the patrons as she disappeared into the background. Keanu took a deep breath and rose to his feet. He glanced around the room, aware that every eye was on him. Then, in a calm voice filled with quiet authority, he spoke. This restaurant was built on the foundation that everyone, no matter how they dress or where they come from, should feel welcome. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case today. But I believe there's always an opportunity to learn and do better. A heavy silence settled over the room as diners absorbed his words. The manager stood beside him, shifting between unease and admiration for the way Keanu was handling the situation. Keanu turned to him and said, "I'd like to meet with the entire team after closing. There are some important matters we need to discuss." The manager nodded immediately. "Of course, it will be done." Mr. Reeves, Once again, I sincerely apologize for everything, the manager said. Keanu gave a small nod before returning to his seat. Slowly, the dining room resumed its usual rhythm, though quiet murmurs continued as patrons reflected on what they had just witnessed. Later that night, the now empty Lumiere dining room stood silent. The staff gathered together, their eyes fixed on Keanu Reeves, who stood at the center of the room. His presence commanded attention, not through intimidation, but through quiet strength. He scanned the room, meeting each person's gaze, his expression calm yet resolute. "We all make mistakes," he began, his voice steady and deliberate. "What truly matters is how we respond to them. Today, we saw something that goes beyond poor service. We witnessed the impact of snap judgments, hidden biases, and a lack of empathy. But this isn't about blame. It's about growth. It's an opportunity." He let his words settle for a moment before shifting his gaze to Ashley. She sat at the back of the group, her eyes brimming with tears, her expression heavy with shame. "Ashley," he said, his tone firm but not unkind, "I know today was a mistake, and mistakes can be corrected if there's a willingness to learn and grow. What you do next is what truly defines you." Turning his attention back to the rest of the team, his voice softened but remained purposeful. "In the world we live in, it's easy to judge people based on appearances, their clothes, their car, where they live. But I want you to think about something. What happens when we choose kindness instead? When we look beyond the surface and see the person standing in front of us for who they really are." He took a slow step forward, his hands slipping into his pockets as his tone grew more reflective. "We all carry struggles that no one else can see. The person who seems out of place might be having the hardest day of their life. The one who doesn't dress the way we expect might have achieved more than we can imagine. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness, especially toward those we think least deserve it, can make all the difference." A heavy silence settled over the group. Some of the staff looked visibly moved, while others cast their eyes downward, lost in thought. Ashley finally lifted her head, quickly wiping her tears. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but filled with remorse. I never saw it that way before," she admitted. "I was so focused on maintaining the restaurant's image, on keeping up a certain standard, that I lost sight of what really matters. I forgot that every person has value, no matter how they look or where they come from." She swallowed hard before adding, "I promise, Mr. Reeves, I'll change." Keanu studied her for a moment before offering a small, encouraging smile. "That promise isn't to me," he said gently. "It's to yourself, Ashley." Keanu continued, his voice steady, yet gentle. "True change doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from within. And if you ever need guidance along the way, know that I'll be here." Ashley nodded vigorously, a mix of relief and determination settling over her. "Kindness isn't about grand gestures," Keanu went on. "It's in the small choices we make every day. It's about recognizing that every person we encounter matters, because they do. That is what defines not just a place, but a person." The manager stepped forward, his expression filled with newfound understanding. "Mr. Reeves, your message is clear," he said with conviction. "We will do everything we can to ensure that Lumiere reflects the values you envisioned. Thank you for reminding us of what truly matters." Keanu gave a serene smile, offering a simple nod before stepping out of the restaurant. A moment of reflection. The streets of Beverly Hills shimmered under the glow of the city lights. Keanu paused on the sidewalk, turning to glance once more at Lumiere's entrance. A soft smile returned to his lips as he reflected on the evening's events. What had transpired tonight was about more than just a restaurant or a single act of mistreatment. It was about something deeper, the importance of creating spaces where people feel seen, heard, and valued. As he continued walking down the illuminated streets, Keanu thought about his words, but more importantly, about the message he hoped would linger in the minds of those who had witnessed the moment. If he could leave them with just one thought, it would be this: in a world where you can be anything, choose to be kind. Because true strength isn't found in judgment, it's found in acceptance. And, above all, it's the small choices we make every day that shape not only the world around us, but also the kind of people we become.